Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So today I want to recommend 7 cartoon CGC 9.8 comics to collect. Yeah, and it sort of occurred to me that these cartoon comics are a bit underappreciated, I think, and have some kind of decent under-the-radar potential, I would say. And in the CGC 9.8, they're fantastic collector items. Yeah, there's not a lot of 9.8s out there for most of them, and pretty tough to find in the CGC 9.8. And I think a lot of these, they're like a reboot show or movie away from just really heating up and taking off in price. So yeah, I thought it was worth its own video for these ones here. So yeah, let's get right into it. Here's 7 cartoon CGC 9.8 comic books to collect. Alright, first one on the list is a Darkwing Duck limited series, number 1. Yeah, Darkwing Duck is a show I remember watching kind of the early 90s. I kind of liked it, and definitely this is a pretty cool comic. This is the first comic book, Darkwing Duck comic book, so it is kind of his first appearance in comics. Darkwing Duck Limited Series number 1, pretty cool cover. A good example of, you know, in the 9.8s, they're great collector items because, yeah, there's only 19 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. So if you're the biggest Darkwing Duck fan, like a 1 of 19 in the 9.8, a perfect Darkwing Duck Limited Series number 1 is sounding pretty awesome. 39.6% the CGC 9.8 ratio, so, you know, nothing to write home about, nothing to pay up for there, more about the 1 of 19. Yeah, of all graded copies, 39.6% of them are CGC 9.8s, not the best rarity. So Darkwing Duck, Limited Series number 1. A lot of these on the list, you want to look at possibly getting them in the raw. The 9.8s are really tough to find. In the raw, these are going to be dirt cheap. These might even be in dollar bins. So yeah, definitely, you know, ones to keep an eye out in the raw. But in the CGC 9.8 for Darkwing Duck Limited Series number 1, saw one sell $186.50. Yeah, $186.50 in an auction. I think that's going to be like a great bang-on fair price right now, I think, for Darkwing Duck Limited Series number 1. Like, maybe if you were the biggest fan in the 9.8 and it just was looking perfect in a new case, you'd maybe even want to pay up to $200 for this one, maybe even a little bit over with, you know, just a 1 of 19 out there. Yeah, it's a pretty great one, I think. And yeah, certainly if they decided to come out with a show or a movie or something like that, I think this one could definitely heat up again, and there's only 19 out there, so yeah, definitely one to consider here on a cartoon list. Good one to start off. Darkwing Duck Limited Series number 1 in the CGC 9.8. Next one's one of the more popular ones on the list, Voltron number 1. Yeah, Voltron number 1 in the CGC 9.8 is pretty well collected. This one, a little bit before my time. Yeah, I don't remember watching Voltron specifically when I was younger. But in the CGC 9.8, there's 160 9.8s in the blue label. So yeah, a little more popular, this one for sure. 160 9.8s. It's from, yeah, I forget the publisher, but it's not like a Marvel or a DC book, so you suspect that this one would be pretty low printed. But 1 of 160 in the 9.8 is pretty great. 50.8% the CGC 9.8 ratio, so actually not very rare at all for like an 80s book in Voltron number 1, which is a bit surprising. Maybe like to see that a little lower. The lower the better on these 9.8 ratios. So of all graded copies, just half of them are 9.8, so that's not that rare in the CGC 9.8. Voltron number 1 in the 9.8. You're seeing quite a few sell for 200. One I saw sell for 228, so I think that's probably going to be the higher end of the fair value. 200 is basically bang on fair value. Maybe you get it for a little less, but yeah, there might be some Voltron rumors. I don't know if this one's heated up lately that I'm not aware of, but I think under 200 is probably doable for this one. If you really want it, biggest Voltron fan, maybe right around 200 is fair. But a pretty cool CGC 9.8, and certainly a Voltron movie would be pretty cool. Like, I've never watched, again, never really watched the cartoon, but I could imagine that it would be a pretty great movie with all the special effects and everything. So maybe some underrated potential for a Voltron number 1. Okay, next one's a pretty great 90s cartoon that I definitely watched. Gargoyles number 1. Yeah, Gargoyles was a pretty cool 90s cartoon. I think I was reading a little bit where like how Batman the Animated Series got really popular and it was like really dark. So Gargoyles was kind of made off the back of that. They wanted to kind of have a darker style cartoon. But Gargoyles number 1 is you know, this is the one that kind of, if you're a Gargoyles fan, the one you want, the first Gargoyles comic. 66 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. So still a pretty great collector item. Not a lot of these. A 1 of 66. Pretty cool if you're the biggest Gargoyles fan, absolutely. 64.7% the 9.8 ratio, so not very rare in the CGC 9.8, with 64.7 of all graded copies being 9.8s. This is a 90s book, but still not that rare. In the CGC 9.8, I think for this one, there seems to be a couple on eBay where people are trying to get, you know, top dollar, I would say, but I think kind of like 125 to 150 is pretty fair for this one. There being 66 out there, I do think it's you know, a little more gettable than some of these other books. But in the CGC 9.8, probably, yeah, maybe even closer to 100's possibly doable if an auction popped up, because not a lot of people are searching for this one, but this is the one to get if you're a Gargoyles fan, and yeah, maybe 125 to 150 if you really wanted it is still, I think, a fair price. With a 1 of 66 out there. Pretty great collector item for a Gargoyles fan, absolutely. So Gargoyles #1 in the CGC 9.8, definitely one to consider. Okay, next one here is probably one of my favorites because I really watched this cartoon when I was young, and it's one of the most rare ones too. I almost bought a raw just before kind of doing some of the research for the video here, but it's Captain Planet and the Planeteers #1. Yeah, this seems to be a really rare book. Yeah, it's a Marvel comic, so that's kind of interesting. You think most Marvel comics are always pretty well printed. Cool fact about this one is it's a Neil Adams cover. Yeah, Neil Adams on the cover is pretty great, I think. Certainly a classic artist on this like pretty unknown book. But Captain Planet and the Planeteers was a cartoon that I can remember a lot. I remember kind of the theme song and everything. Interesting, in the 9.8 though, this is extremely rare. There's only one 9.8 out there, yeah. There's, I think there was 10 graded, 10 or 11 graded, so the 9.8 ratio is 11.1%. Only one out there, not a lot of these graded, but it's kind of trending in a really rare 9.8 book, and them being there only being one 9.8 out there, it is extremely rare. So, you know, this is one with only one out there. You want to consider in the raw if you do want it. A couple on eBay, admittedly in pretty beat up shape, kind of very good to find, most of them. For around $10, I think is doable in this one. I almost kind of pulled the trigger on a sort of a very fine one. There's still some noticeable spine dinks on it, and I think it was like probably going to be about 10 to 15. But personally though, I'm going to wait. I didn't end up pulling the trigger. I'm going to wait for a higher grade raw. You know, maybe like a 9.4 or 9.6 or something like that, and I'd be willing to pay kind of 25 to 30 for a really nice crisp one, I think. Yeah, Captain Planet and the Planeteers #1. Yeah, one to kind of focus on in the raw. There's only one in the 9.8. Check out those dollar bins. Yeah, this could be one in those dollar bins that you could grab, but a cool cartoon in the 90s that I watched, and I do want this one, and I'll be on the lookout for some raws. I'm going to go to my local comic shop, actually. They're a pretty great back issue comic shop. So I'll be checking out their dollar bins and their back issue bins. Okay, next one is straight up a very serious investment grade book, I think, this one. It's The Tick #1 from 1988. Yeah, this is the first Tick comic, and it's extremely rare. Yeah, it's there's, you know, you see a couple auctions in the raw and things like that, but in the CGC 9.8, it's extremely rare. So interesting. If we do have a look on the census, there's only 4 in the CGC 9.8 for like this tough cover. But in the 1980s, you know, I always thought basically like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, the first print in the 9.8, and sort of Amazing Spider-Man 300 in the 9.8 were the two rarest books. But in the 9.8, but The Tick #1 from 1988 has a lower 9.8 ratio than those two books. Yeah, 1.3% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8s. So this is, yeah, if you use that ratio as a measure of the relative rarity in the CGC 9.8, this is more rare than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 first print in the 9.8, and more rare than Amazing Spider-Man 300 9.8. So certainly an investment grade book. This is definitely the one you want if you're a Tick fan. You got to consider it in the raw pretty much. It's going to be so hard to grab one of those 4. The fair value on Go Collect, they had it at $2,000 though. So that is, I mean, if you're the biggest Tick fan, this is extremely rare for one of those 4 for $2,000. I think that's an insta buy if you're like the biggest Tick fan for this super rare book. But if not, in the raw, I think sort of, pretty beat up copies are kind of 50 to 75. And then for a good looking copy, you're getting up to 100 and over. And certainly high grade copies, I think, would start to get really expensive in this one, given how rare it is. But if you're the biggest Tick fan, yeah, Tick number 1 from 1988 is definitely the one to get. And in the 9.8, there's only 4 of them. If you can swing one of those, more power to you. And yeah, right around 2,000, I think, is actually a good price for one of those 4, I think, in the CGC 9.8, given how rare it is. Okay, next one is totally off the map, I think, but it's Beast Wars Critical Mass number 1. So Beast Wars is kind of a 90s Transformers spin-off. Almost just they copied Transformers almost, but made it a little bit different, I think, in certain ways. This book does sort of feature the Transformers. Interesting for this one, this is the first Beast Wars comic, the first comic book Beast Wars are in, I guess. There's only one CGC 9.8 out there, and there was only one graded, actually, and it was a CGC 9.8. So this is definitely one you're going to want to consider in the raw. I think it's pretty extremely rare, though, and it's a decent looking cool cover. So this one, in the raw, I think there's one on eBay right now where it's completely beat up, like probably a good grade, good to very good. Lots of spine dinks and everything, and I think they're trying to get about $50 for it. So I think this is just an extremely rare one. If you can get it in sort of a very fine for under $50, let's call it. I think if you're a Beast Wars fan, this might be one worth paying up for. And then if a Beast Wars reboot ever gets on, starts to happen, or something happens in pop culture with Beast Wars that makes them more popular. Yeah, this could just be a super rare book that people would pay quite a lot of money for, possibly. Because I like Beast Wars, and I think there are some Beast Wars fans out there that, maybe if something came out, they would come out of the closet a little bit and get back into things. But Beast Wars Critical Mass number 1 is just one to consider, a super rare one if you're a Beast Wars fan, absolutely. Okay, last one here is an interesting one, and definitely a cool cartoon, CGC 9.8. Yeah, it's Disney's DuckTales number 1. I remember watching DuckTales. Yeah, I think they had it syndicated all through the 90s. I don't remember too many 80s cartoons, and this was an 80s cartoon, but I do remember watching it in the 90s. DuckTales was pretty cool. This book, though, is the first DuckTales in comics, and it came out in 1988. There's 16 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. So yeah, I mean, if you're the biggest DuckTales fan, this is definitely the one to get. A couple people on the team too have, I think, remember someone grabbing this one, a couple people grabbing Gargoyles, Darkwing Duck as well. So, there's definitely some collectors out there. There's a niche for these type of books, but I think it's, as I said, kind of underappreciated. So yeah, definitely one to focus on, worth a video. Yeah, the DuckTales number 1, though, with the 16 only in the 9.8 is pretty great. 53.3% the 9.8 ratio, so not that rare. Probably not worth paying up for this one. Yeah, there's actually a couple on eBay for this book right now. I think sort of in the $225 to $250 range is a great price. Maybe if an auction came up and you were on top of your searches. I don't think a lot of people are kind of searching for this one, but might even be able to get it closer to 100. But if you're a big DuckTales fan, this is kind of a cool one. It's, a 1 of 16 in the 9.8. And I think it probably would be worth to pay sort of $125 to $150 if you really wanted this one. And definitely one to consider in the raw as well. Yeah, all of these I just think are possible dollar bin finds. Yeah, which is really cool, I think. Okay, that was 7 of cartoon CGC 9.8 comics to collect. I'll have a full list in the description below of all of them if you want to have a quick look. But yeah, this was a video I thought of, and getting some inspiration from the team for some people kind of picking up a Gargoyles in the 9.8 and DuckTales in kind of the past few weeks here. And yeah, I think these cartoon CGC 9.8 books are just a little bit underappreciated, and certainly they're cold. They're you can get them for a decent price. And if there was any kind of reboot show or heated up, I could see a lot of these going for pretty big money, considering, as I said, yeah, like in the 9.8, they're pretty great collector items. There's not a lot out there. So a lot of things going for this cartoon CGC 9.8 niche, and you can still get them at a great price. So I think these books in the 9.8 are definitely ones to consider. Okay, thanks for watching. Yeah, if you haven't already, I would invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8. Yeah, I'd love to have you on our comic book collecting and comic book investing team. Hit the bell for all the latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter as well. All the links in the description below. But yeah, thanks so much for watching today. This was a cool one. I kind of thought of the idea in the last few days here and really wanted to get a video done on this underappreciated niche, I think. These cartoon CGC 9.8s. Alright, thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate all the support. Message me on Instagram too if you just had any, whatever questions. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Thanks again though, and I'll see you on the next one.